Welcome to the Hyatt Distinguished Leadership Talk. The School of Civil and Environmental Engineering is indebted to Ken Hyatt for making our Distinguished Leadership Speaker Series possible. We are also grateful to MBP for their generous support of the Hyatt Distinguished Speaker Dinner. My name is Ajo Kennedy. I serve as Associate Chair for Global Leadership and Research Development in Civil and Environmental Engineering. And it is my distinct honor and pleasure this afternoon to introduce our distinguished speaker, General Philip Breedlove. General Breedlove has had a superb career of honorable service to his country that spans several decades. He was raised in Forest Park, Georgia, and received a commission in 1977 as Distinguished Graduate of Georgia Tech's ROTC program. A fighter pilot by trade, General Breedlove is a command pilot with over 3,500 flying hours, primarily in the F-16. He has flown combat missions to both Bosnia and Kosovo. The general has commanded at a squadron, group, wing, and numbered Air Force levels, and has served as the 36th Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. He was previously the commander of the U.S. Air Forces in Europe, commander of the U.S. Air Forces in Africa, commander of the Headquarters Allied Air Command at Ramstein, and director of the Joint Air Power Competence Center in Kalkar, Germany. He was responsible for Air Force's activities conducted through the 3rd Air Force in an area of operations covering more than 19 million square miles. This area included 105 countries in Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, as well as the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans. In May 2013, General Breedlove became the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, the 17th United States General Officer appointed to this key leadership position, first held by General Dwight David Eisenhower, whom you may know led in the development of our interstate highway system. General Breedlove is a recipient of the Distinguished Service Medal. The general is married to his college sweetheart, Cindy, and they have 2 daughters, Samantha and Rebecca, and a son, Daniel. Please join me in giving a hearty, warm, and distinguished welcome to General Philip Breedlove.
Okay, so I hope the mics are working. Good to see you all here. Good to see some great friends from the past who have snuck in the back there. And it's great to be standing in my own college, talking to some people who are following in the footsteps that I have been through in my career. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here today. As you're aware, I'm very often in front of large groups, and often then discussing things that frankly hurt my head. And I find this opportunity in front of this group and a refreshing change of pace, frankly. And might I say, the football game was a great start to being here. For the majority of my speeches, I usually refer to a map with Europe in the middle and walk a big arc around Europe, highlighting issues and concerns from the Arctic to the Mediterranean. Of course, I discuss my concerns about Russia and the group that we call ISIS, or I like to call Daesh, and the fact that both of these troops or these issues are in Syria at the moment. I discuss mass immigration and refugee issues flowing into Europe and NATO's role in fostering a stable government in Afghanistan. And yes, those are big concerns with worldwide implications, but that is not what we're going to talk about today. In fact, we're going to talk about leadership. But when we get to the question and answer period, I'm going to open it up to you for anything you want to talk about. Anything from this, what we're going to have in the speech, or anything from around the world. I'll be glad to engage with you. In fact, it's quite frankly my favorite part of doing these kind of talks. But today I'm inspired because I'm talking to Yellow Jackets. But even more important than that, today I'm talking to leaders. And developing leaders has always been a critical part of my career as a senior Air Force officer. And one of the things I find about my tasks in leadership that I see as the most rewarding. Leaders. You may ask yourself, what are you talking about, General? I'm a student working towards a degree, and a degree that I just hope will get me a job. Well, how different do you think it was for a 21-year-old Georgia Tech civil engineering student named Phil Breedlove? What I see in this crowd are the faces of people who America will rely on for the next 40 to 50 years to solve problems. Frankly, to solve hard problems. The problems that people in this room will be challenged with will require great leadership and great innovation. Don't doubt the thought for a moment that there are great leaders who will solve these hard problems sitting right amongst you today, right now. You probably know who they are. You study with them and work with them every day. Now, I know that the idea of leadership as a student at Georgia Tech may not seem all that important now, but that will not always be the case. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets I know have led and continue to lead, and you will lead as well. And people will listen to you. People will follow you. The reputation of this institution precedes you. People know that you are problem solvers. Why is this important? Well, a minute ago I talked about the concerns I deal with every day. What do you think are the problems that will challenge you? Clean water, clean energy, environmental crises, agricultural issues. There are a whole host of possibilities. No one can be certain, but one thing that is certain is change. And change in itself brings on new challenges. With every challenge that will arise, we will need people like you who will be leaders and innovators, who roll up their sleeves and find ways to solve problems. I have great confidence in you, and I have great confidence in the statement I just made. I have confidence because as a nation, that is what we have done throughout our history. We as a society have a great track record for developing ideas or technologies that make our lives easier, make us more efficient, or solve many of our problems. As a nation, we have taken aviation from the Wright brothers to outer space. We have made advancements in the medical field that have saved countless numbers of lives globally. And we have developed pocket-sized computing technologies that allow us to communicate, anticipate the weather, conduct our banking, broadcast current events, educate ourselves, make purchases, and I guess that nearly every one of you has one of them in your pocket right now. I hope it's on vibrate, by the way. None of these advancements, these achievements would have been possible without someone leading the way. It was a person or a group of people who were challenged by a situation. From those people came an inspiration, an idea, a possibility, an opportunity. Someone capitalized on those opportunities and developed innovative approaches to meeting challenges. It's critically important to accept that innovation and leadership are tied together in many aspects. Good leadership sets the environment so that innovation can occur. Conversely, bad leadership stifles creativity and limits innovation, and in the worst case, destroys innovation altogether. In the military, we operate in a chain of command-based system. Simply by rule of rank, a major leads a lieutenant colonel leads a major, and so on. But trust me, rank does not a leader make. I have worked for some of the best, and I've worked for some of the worst. Leadership is a very personal characteristic. Now, I don't want to clutter this talk with a lot of military mumbo-jumbo, but if you will humor me for a moment, I think there is value to sharing one more military term. We call it mission command. Under this concept, the mission command concept, we define leadership of the organization as the exercise of authority and direction by the commander using mission orders to enable disciplined initiative within the commander's intent to empower agile and adaptive leaders in the conduct of operations. And that's about as far as I'm going to go into the military business. What I want to do is talk about how those words relate to our world as civilian leaders. So let's just highlight a couple of these words. Disciplined initiative. Someone has to paint the white lines on the road so that folks can move forward. But if the white lines are painted so tightly that they can't display initiative, you stifle a great product. Commander's intent. Someone at the head of the organization needs to set a goal, a direction, so that those white lines lead somewhere. Empower agile and adaptive leaders. So the bottom line is, give your folks the capability to move out and do the work. Don't micromanage them. One of the worst things about those nice little things you carry in your pocket is you can be micro-informed and then micromanage your people. It's the worst. It's the worst. No one is going to be an adaptive and innovative thinker if they're micromanaged. Be micro-informed, but don't micromanage. Let's talk about these in civilian terms. Simply translated, it means that a supervisor explains what he or she wants and accomplishes this through mission orders or a mission statement. This is the what, or a description of the desired end state. From there, subordinates are given the latitude to figure out the how. Give them a job, but don't tell them how to do it necessarily. Train them, educate them, empower them, give them the resources that they need, give them the encouragement to take off, and then set them on the path. Quite honestly, some of the best leadership stories evolve out of the original question of how. How can we increase our profits? How do we get our message to the maximum number of people? How are we going to get men on the moon? The key word in the definition that is really worth talking about, the one that I like the best, if you hadn't already figured it out, is empower. You get the how by empowering people with a mutual understanding of the goal, and in turn giving them the ability to develop means or avenues to achieve that goal. With that one simple word, empower, you enable creativity. You inspire leaders to step up. By empowering your subordinates, you create an environment for innovation to thrive. And when leaders create organizational cultures where people are allowed to think, to act, and to achieve, they in essence are developing future leaders. As you heard earlier, Eisenhower was the first SACIR. I still sit in his desk. It's horrible ergonomically. I bang my knees into it every time I sit down as a tall person. But the fact that you can sit at Eisenhower's desk is pretty cool. Eisenhower, the first SACIR, said, "Leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something that you want done because he or she wants to." In the military, I can command a subordinate to go do something. And they may do it halfway. They might actually do a good job. But if I lead them and they want to do it, they will always do a good job. And they will find that innovative approach to get it done. I knew the importance of buy-in when it comes to mission accomplishment. If people do not understand the overall intent or are unaware of the goals or objectives, good luck to ever getting buy-in. To illustrate some of these concepts, I have a couple of examples. The first example, I would really like to focus on empowerment. Now, I love to talk about aviation, and there are countless examples of great leadership throughout history which led to great achievements in aviation or the production of fantastic military aircraft. But today, I'm going to steer away from military aviation. Instead, discuss one example of amazing leadership in a civilian aviation. Founded in 1971, Southwest Airlines has seen 42 consecutive years of profitability. Think about that. It was Fortune magazine's number 9 on their list of the most admired companies in the world for 2014 and was named Airline of the Year by Air Transport in 2015. Their success was built on a foundation of leadership philosophies set in motion by their founder, Herb Kelleher. Follow-on CEOs Jim Parker, Colleen Barrett, and Gary Kelly have further capitalized on a winning formula that simply endures in these 3 words. Put people first. The mission is dedication to the highest quality of customer service delivered with a sense of warmth, friendliness, individual pride, excuse me, and company spirit. That mission statement serves to focus the energy of the organization's employees on a specific goal, which is an important aspect of leadership. But the winning formula truly resides in its contract with its employees. We are committed to provide our employees a stable work environment with equal opportunity for learning and personal growth. Creativity and innovation are encouraged for improving the effectiveness of Southwest Airlines. Above all, employees will be provided the same concern, respect, and caring attitude within the organization that they are expected to share externally with every Southwest customer. Penned in 1988, that contract has inspired many groundbreaking employee-driven concepts. By putting customers and employees first, the airline states up front that people are the most valued aspect of the company. Now that's empowerment. That's empowerment. From the basic question derived from their mission statement, how can we deliver the highest quality of customer service? Employees have responded with great innovative ideas. The people of Southwest created the first airline website in 1995. In 2014, 80% of passenger revenues came from online ticket purchases. Beyond that, their employees have created a blog site called Nuts About Southwest, where employees, customers, and partners, and in that website, every time they say employee or customer, it's capitalized for emphasis. They are intentionally capitalized. Share stories on the blog about experiences, upcoming events, travel, contests, etc., etc. It's a great blog. Imagine a blog where your employees and your customers are on it together, interacting. Southwest employees are allowed, even encouraged, to positively interact with customers with amusing boarding announcements and songs sung by their crew members. Some of you may have heard them. It kind of shocked me the first time I heard it, but it put a smile on my face, and they had great service, so off we went. You may have even seen them on YouTube. Their colorfully painted aircraft demonstrates the esprit de corps within the company and within the cities or organizations the paint schemes seem to represent. By no means am I advertising for Southwest. This is not a paid announcement. In fact, I can't even fly them now as I'm forced to take my own military aircraft around. But this talk is about leadership, and Southwest has done more than a few things to get it right when it comes to leadership. Gary Kelly, CEO of Southwest, is quoted. He says, "Our people are our single greatest strength and most enduring long-term competitive advantage. Empower your people, and good ideas will follow." Let's take a moment to discuss leadership in the development of technology. You might not know who Harald Blåtand is. Harald Blåtand was king of Denmark from about 940 until about 986. He is remembered for uniting Denmark, converting his country to Christianity, and also for giving his name to the technology which many of us rely on every day. But I'll get back to that in a minute. I would like to talk about Sven Mattsson and Jim Kardach. Sven graduated as an engineer in 1979 and began to work at Lund University. Lund recognized his talent, so they sent him to Caltech, where he formulated his PhD thesis: how to develop a circuit simulator that would reproduce analog behavior in an integrated circuit. Now, when I graduated from Georgia Tech in '77, I was pretty smart. But I've been a fighter pilot for the last 39 years, so I'm not even sure what all of that meant. But a few years down the road, he went to work for Ericsson, where he was placed in a forward-looking project to work on a concept involving short-range radio links with low output. His challenge: how could mobile phones with this kind of radio link communicate with each other without having to be connected by cables? Leadership within Ericsson soon realized that they should not be developing this technology on their own. So they reached out to Intel. In 1997, Intel's head of technological development, Jim Kardach, became Madison's enthusiastic colleague when his boss at the time asked him, "Can you figure out how to integrate wireless into our notebook?" Taking this key leadership role, Kardach invited Nokia, IBM, and Toshiba and set up a joint development group for the project. The group ran under open intellectual property policies, allowing them to take best pieces from everywhere and put them together. They established goals on what they wanted this thing to cost and strategies to build it. It required security and privacy and had to work across the world, so they were required to adapt and fix some of the regulatory issues that surrounded it. The group had a term sheet that everyone had to agree to, and they did. Intel's Kardach became the leader simply because IBM and Toshiba didn't trust each other. And Ericsson and Nokia didn't trust each other either. So Kardach was kind of the neutral ground, the Switzerland in this affair. With great leadership and in spite of the challenges, the technology group and what they developed was frankly amazing. It worked by equipping every unit, telephone, PC, printer, keyboard, headset, microphone, etc., with a chip and an antenna. As soon as two units made contact with each other, they began negotiations and established a suitable link. But it became apparent that they needed to have a single name, as Intel would talk about BizRF. Ericsson referred to it as MC Link, and Nokia called it Low Power RF. Created a lot of confusion. Well, at the end of the summer in 1997, Kardach and Madison were having a beer together in Toronto. They had been taking part in a competition about a new radio system with their project. But the presentation was not successful, and it didn't give them much chance of winning, and that's frankly why they were having beers. Madison had given Kardach the English translation of a Danish book called The Long Ships, and Kardach was fascinated by the man described as the hero's father-in-law, a king who had united Denmark in his time, King Harald Blåtand. And so these men decided to bestow the name of this technology that unites millions of personal electronic devices around the world to him, Harald Blåtand, aka Harald Bluetooth. And now you know the rest of the story. This is, of course, a condensed version of a much longer story. The point is, these men were posed with a challenge and worked through numerous subsequent challenges. Through all of this, good leadership was required to meet the mission. And so for these engineers, these leaders who were given the task of integrating mobile phones, tablets, earpieces, home stereos, etc., the significance of the name Bluetooth with it carries a story of collaboration, teamwork, but most importantly, leadership. There are countless examples in recent history of individuals stepping up when called upon to drive innovative solutions to hard problems. As we look to the future, I'm encouraged for more than a few reasons, many of them sitting in this room. Just look at the technology that is at our disposal. Information is only a click away. If I asked you who was the MVP in the 1972 World Series, I guarantee I could get an answer before I stop talking, which is going to happen very quickly. And also look at how connected we have become. We can easily and regularly collaborate with colleagues around the world. This capacity is what allows me to leave my job and come here to talk to you. So it's a blessing and frankly a curse because my work just comes with me. But as you leave today, I ask that you consider these key takeaways. First and foremost, you are a leader. Whether you work in a group of 500 or a group of 2, someone, and I'm looking at you, needs to take initiative and someone needs to lead. I'm encouraged by you. In the world out there today, in the Pentagon, Georgia Tech engineers are known as leaders. Could there be a better group of people to turn to ask to lead in developing solutions for emergent challenges in biotechnology, data engineering, nanotechnology, manufacturing, or sustainable energy? Second, as you lead, never forget that people are your most valuable resource. Empower them. Create strong teams. Through great teams come great innovations. Collaborative efforts are essential to solve big problems. Additionally, build your team smartly. Pick people you can trust. Know their strengths and their weaknesses and place them accordingly. Do not always pick like-minded people and be willing to listen to dissenting opinions. Jim Collins says it best in his book, Good to Great. Get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. And last, we are blessed to be living in a time when so much information is readily available for us. Did anybody look up my question about the 72 series? You guys are actually paying attention. It's good. Take advantage of the technologies that make our lives so much easier. But I think this should be accomplished with a warning. Use these tools. Use the technology. But never substitute them for relationships. I have learned over a lifetime of experience, when things get really ugly, it is the relationships that we have built with our bosses, our peers, our friends, and our teammates that will carry the day. Be inspired by your interactions with each other. I got to tell you, I'm inspired by Yellow Jackets. I thank you for letting me be here today, and I'm ready to take your questions. I'll just remind that I'm willing to answer questions on any subject. I normally get asked questions about Russia and Turkey and Syria and all kinds of things. So anything you want to talk about, from leadership, technology, what it's like after you leave Georgia Tech, to my tough problems, which start in the Arctic and end in Africa. Sing it out and I'll repeat it so that those who are getting this over the wires can hear.
It's working.
All right, so if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring you the mic and then you can ask your question.
It's always hard to get the first one. Over here are a couple.
Yeah, please state your name and your affiliation and then you can ask your question.
Joel Cowan, professor here, of a sort. The relief Syrian refugee situation, and that's impact on Europe. Will the Europeans come together and grapple with that in your judgment? And do you have a role in it?
So it's a great question. And as you have watched in the papers now, the nations of Europe are dealing with this in very different ways. The institutions of Europe have not stepped up to the problem yet. And frankly, the institutions of the world have not stepped up to the problem yet. And so nations are dealing with this in a much more individual way. Very recently, we have seen the EU, the European Union, begin to deal with some of the issues, and that, frankly, is where it should start. The EU and the UN should probably lead in this affair, and I'll explain why in just a minute. But as they begin to take a more active role and adjudicate the problems across the nations of Europe, this will be a great help. The nations of Europe, frankly, deal with this differently, not because they have different ideological responses, but they have different fiscal capability. The poorer nations of Europe cannot afford the influx of the migrants and therefore are looking for ways to share cost and share how they address the problem, and frankly looking for the ways that they can to move the migrants on to the richer countries that can afford to do it. Why would I say that the EU and the United Nations are a better organizations to deal with this? And this is leading to the answer of how NATO or I will be involved. As you know, that the core capability of the NATO alliance, it's primarily a military alliance. Clearly, we are guided by political bodies. The NAC, the NATO North Atlantic Council, is a political body that gives the military its direction. But the core strength and capabilities of NATO are its military capabilities and capacities. The problem of migrants and immigration can be addressed in certain ways by military capabilities, but really there needs to be a broader approach to it. In our schools, we talk about a simple model for the strengths that nations have to apply to problems. We call it the DIME model: diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. And it's going to take all four of those capabilities to address this immigration problem. The NATO is strong, of course, in the M, or the military, but NATO has very little diplomatic, informational, or economic capability. What the EU has is all of those things: diplomatic, informational, and economic, as well as the UN. And that's why you see quite often the EU and the UN reach out to NATO to partner, because we can bring the M in the DIME model. I don't see NATO getting more broadly involved in it right now, frankly, because the EU and the UN have asked us for very little help. They realize that this is more of a diplomatic, informational, and economic problem. They have asked us for some help on the high seas to help them understand and characterize the flows from the North African continent and across the land bridges of Turkey. They've asked us in a military sense to understand those flows. But really, the tougher solutions to the problem will come in those diplomatic, informational, and economic realms. So there's still a long ways to go. They're going to have to come together to address it, because it's going to happen whether they want it to or not. And they're coming to grips with that. And what's happening finally is the EU, to some degree the UN, are beginning to bring a fabric which uses all four of those elements of national power to address the problem to it. And that will be the eventual Band-Aid. To really fix this, you have to get at the root problem, which is being caused in those ungoverned spaces where governments are not meeting the needs of their people, or they are directly attacking their own people. And those ungoverned spaces are creating places where fathers, mothers don't want to raise their families, and so they're getting on the road. We have to, in the long term, get to the root problem before we'll be able to create the symptom that comes from that root problem. Did that answer? Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Tony Godey. I'm with the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I was wondering, we all understand how important leadership is, but would like to understand your philosophy, your life perspectives on establishing consistent life priorities, and the importance of work-life balance?
This is an incredible question and a great one. And part of what I will be lecturing on at the Air War College and the Air Command and Staff College tomorrow in Montgomery, Alabama, to our rising leaders in the Air Force. Work-life balance. So here is a mantra that my folks will tell you is on every slide I use when I talk to young leaders. And I will share a little bit of a personal history that explains why I do this. I don't want to get too personal, but the bottom line is I have a mantra that goes like this. And when I'm in front of joint audiences, I plug in whatever it is. You could put IBM or Georgia Tech in this equation. But here's how it goes. The family is before the Air Force. The family is during the Air Force. And the family is after the Air Force. One of these two is permanent, and one of them is temporary. So you need to make your big decisions and your life balance decisions on the permanent piece, which is the family, and not the temporary piece, which is the Air Force. Young Major Phil Breedlove was having his first combat experiences and wanting to be a much more senior commander. I never really wanted to be a general. All I wanted to do was command and lead other F-16 aviators, and that's what my focus was on. And as a major, my focus got unbalanced and almost cost me what was most important in my life. Been married for 36 years and raised a nice family because I figured it out before I messed it up so bad. And so the family is before IBM, Georgia Tech. The family is during, and the family is after. All that other stuff is the temporary stuff in the middle. So this is easier said than done. Work-life balance is important. As you move up, you get more and more responsibility. Your days become longer, and the expectations during your off hours become tougher and tougher. And it's a time in life where you have to occasionally target certain inviolate principles. I will coach my son's soccer team. It's going to happen. Now, short of war or deployment or whatever, you have some capability to make that happen. I intended to take my wife on a 25th anniversary cruise, and it got canceled because of Iraq. I intended to take my wife on a 30th anniversary vacation, and that got canceled because of Afghanistan. Well, the 35th, I knew that I wouldn't make it to 36 if I didn't deliver. So I got my wife to Crete for a week, and we got that piece squared away. But the bottom line is, sometimes you just have to make tough decisions and stick by it. I got to tell you, I don't get in politics. Don't even want to go there. As a military man, you can't, especially when you're wearing this, you can't. But there are people out there being criticized now because they're starting to say, I have a work-life balance and I have to do things for my family. I just got to tell you, I got great respect for people who will make a public decision like that and talk about, I might take this job, but I'm going to continue to coach my daughter's soccer team. I will occasionally go to PTA. I will take my wife on our 35th wedding anniversary. And you just make it happen. Did I answer? Okay, great. Who's next? Back there.
Hi, my name is David. I study civil engineering here at Georgia Tech.
Nice.
I had a few questions. The first is, what is your personal view about the referendum in Crimea compared to the Kosovo, which is essentially a referendum from Bosnia? And the second is the disarmament of especially Germany, and how that fares with the current Russian aggression. And lastly is the possibility of the Ukraine joining the NATO, if it were to be, if the right part of Ukraine were to be seceded. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if I can read those back. I'm 60 years old, so sometimes I forget. Give me the first of the three again.
First is comparison between Crimean referendum and Kosovo.
Okay, and the second one was?
And second one was disarmament of the Bundeswehr and how it fares with the current Russian aggression. And third one was the possibility.
I got that one.
Okay.
Okay, what I will do is not talk to each one of these specifically, but I will talk to each of them and try to tie it all together, if you will allow me to do that. So I see almost no comparison between Crimea and Kosovo. Essentially in Kosovo, we had a situation where some incredibly bad things were happening to people based on the decisions of some pretty, what I would call aggressive and selfish men. Greed is a horrible thing, and trying to keep control of people and using tools like genocide and other things to keep yourself in power brought an international condemnation, and an international force decided to address the issue. In Crimea, we see a very different thing. I'm assuming you're talking about the Russian invasion of Crimea now that they hold Crimea as a part of Russia again. So for about the last 20 years, since the fall of the wall, we have been in a time where we had hoped that nations would take force off the table as the way of solving international disputes. Now, all over the world, we still have force being used on people. But we had hoped at the end of the fall of the wall that we would have a time where nation states did not use force against other nation states. And what we see in Crimea is exactly the opposite. We see a revanchist Russia who went through a series of exercises to mask what they were doing. And then one of the exercises became a military invasion of another sovereign nation. So one nation state used force to change internationally recognized boundaries, and they call the word annexed. I use the word invade. It's a lot clearer definition of what actually happened. And they took over Crimea. And they still occupy Crimea. So in one case, you had a situation on the ground where there was some atrocities going on, and an internationally recognized bodies, or some internationally recognized bodies, took action against that force. In Crimea, we had a nation state invade another nation state and changed internationally recognized borders by force. Something that we had hoped were off of the table after the fall of the wall. I am struggling to understand your second question, the difference between the disarmament of the Bundeswehr and Russian aggression.
Sorry. Thank you. I was talking about the budget cut of the European armies and how that would prepare to against the possible Russian aggression. Seems like
Okay, gosh, now I get your question. Okay, so let me read it back to you to make sure I answer the right thing. You're asking how I look at the way that European armies over the last 8 to 10 years have drawn down, and how that now addresses or is able to address the current aggression from Russia. Okay, good. I was in a totally different place. It is worrisome. But remember what we've been trying to do. Since the fall of the wall, we have been trying to develop a Europe, and these three words are developed by the current administration, a Europe whole, free, and at peace. Phil Breedlove would add prosperous to that, because what helps keep the peace is when you have a good economy that meets people's needs. And so for the last 20 years after the fall of the wall, when we thought that nations would no longer change borders by force, we have all been taking a peace dividend. And frankly, it was probably the right thing to do. If you truly believed that we were going to end up in a situation where we were going to have a Europe whole, free, and at peace, why would we spend a lot of money to maintain these large land armies? Now in 2008, you know that we had a problem. Russia invaded Georgia. They still occupy two big chunks of Georgia, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. And that sort of gave us a little bit of a wake-up call. But once again, to try to get the economies going, we all decided, okay, we're going to make a partner out of Russia, and we're going to work hard at developing relationships, binding economies with Russia for a Europe whole, free, and at peace, and I had prosperous. Well, obviously, Crimea is another wake-up call. The invasion of the Donbass, shortly after that, 6 months later, a second wake-up call. And then 2 months after that, the Russians moved the boundaries in Georgia by about 2 kilometers. Everybody says, well, no big deal. They just moved the border by 2 kilometers. Well, if you think about it and look on the map, that 2 kilometers moved Russian control over the top of the 2 biggest north-south pipelines of energy going through Georgia. So now Russia controls all of the energy flow through Georgia. Russia does. So we've seen a series of problems with Russia. And now everyone is asking the question you're asking. Did we go too far in reducing our force in Europe? And what you're seeing is that most of the nations have agreed they have gone too far. In NATO, 18 of the nations have reversed their declining military spending and have now started to turn their spending around because they see that they need to reinvest in security, because Russia has once again put in force on the table in changing internationally recognized boundaries. The last question was, will Ukraine ever become a part of NATO? That's up to Ukraine. We'll always get criticized, but we need to remember that there's 2 sides of every problem. What the West perceives and what Russia perceives. Russia continues to feel like that the West is trying to encircle them and contain them. We in the West feel the same thing, and that is nations are allowed to choose their own destiny. The people of the nations of Eastern Europe, former Soviet pact nations, they all asked to be a part of NATO. NATO didn't go out and grab them and pull them in. In fact, it's very hard to get into NATO, isn't it? Watching Montenegro, Georgia, Macedonia, and others who want to be a part of NATO and desperately can't get in. So as far as Ukraine, I would say it's a long road for them to probably join first the EU and then possibly NATO. But I don't hold a lot of hope for that right now. As you know, Russia is now a part of occupying a large part of the Donbass. And whenever Ukraine starts talking fervently about moving to the West, Russia ratchets up the pressure and the fighting and the killing in the eastern part of Ukraine until the talk about joining the West dies down, and then they release the pressure in eastern Ukraine. People call these frozen conflicts. Georgia's a frozen conflict. To some degree, Nagorno-Karabakh is a frozen conflict. Transnistria and Moldova is a frozen conflict. And then this one in Ukraine may become a frozen conflict. I don't like that term because they're really warm conflicts. That's what they do. They ratchet the heat up when they're trying to become a part of the West, and they lower it when they take it easy. So I really don't hold a lot of hope in the short term for Ukraine joining either the EU or NATO. But what I do know is that the people of Ukraine want to be a part of the West. I travel to Ukraine. I was there recently and spoke with both their president and their prime minister. And Ukrainians look very much like New York, Milan, Rome, Berlin, especially around Kyiv, the capital. They want to be a part of the West. I over-answered your question. I'm sorry. Thank you.
My name is Firuz Israel, a Georgia Tech alumnus. Expanding on your theme of leadership, there are different styles of leadership that I would like to ask you about. For instance, in the military, Omar Bradley and George Patton had completely different styles,
Amen.
but they both succeeded. And my question is, how do you attribute their success and their style, and how do you reconcile that?
Ooh. Okay, so your observation is exactly correct. I'm going to answer it very simply because to go into the details would take a long time, but I think that there are leaders that have styles that are best adapted to certain situations. Have you ever, you don't see them too much anymore, but we used to have these red boxes on the wall, and there were inside the red boxes were a fire extinguisher, and then there was a little hammer on the outside, and it said, break glass in case of fire. Well, Patton is a break glass in case of fire kind of guy. Fabulous, fabulous leader for when there's a huge war going on, but not so good in peacetime. I mean, he was a great leader to his troops in peacetime, but he got in a lot of trouble. He was about the most politically incorrect human being ever born. And he would never survive in today with 24-hour news. He would be on every day answering for something he said the day before. So what I guess I would say is that there are leaders who are best in certain situations. In Eisenhower, think about what he had to put up with. Think about the personalities of Montgomery and all of those who were under him, trying to tell him how to invade Europe, how to retake Europe. And Eisenhower was a calm guy. He could sort that out. He could take the rough edges off the Pattons and the Montgomerys, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess a short answer is there are a lot of different leadership styles. And some of them are very much tied to the time. But what I will tell you, I don't think changes. And even Patton is this way, even though he got in trouble a couple of times for saying, I should have kissed the guy or whatever, you remember that episode. All of those leaders knew that it was their people that was the most important thing. In this country and in our military, we have some of the best technology and weaponry in the world. Our businesses have some of the best technology and capability in the world. But it's not that makes us the best. It's the people inside of it that make us the best. And that's why I said over and over. One of the other things on that same leadership slide that we talked about, the mantra of the work-life balance. One of the other things I have on that leadership slide is take care of your people and they will take care of the mission. As a leader, if you think you're doing the mission, you're wrong. Or I would offer that you're wrong. Maybe you might have a different opinion, but it's the people. They're the ones that get it done. And all of those leaders, from Montgomery to Patton to Khrushchev, all of them, they all recognize that you have to lead and motivate men and women or you're going nowhere. It's the people. So I would think that's a common ingredient. Who else? Yes, sir.
So my name is Jonathan Gillis, and I'm a grad student here at Tech, mechanical engineering. Sorry, there was a lot of yelling on Saturday at the game.
Me too.
So a lot of us are about to graduate and join corporate America, et cetera, and we will not be in a position quite soon to lead other individuals. We'll have
You might be surprised.
Okay. But how do you said you worked for bad leaders. What if we have to work for bad leaders? How do we work through those times?
So first and foremost, you're issued at the beginning of your real life buckets, 2 buckets. One bucket is good leadership. Another bucket is bad leadership. Whenever you see either, save it. Don't discount what you learn from bad leaders. Some of the best lessons I've ever learned are from 2 individuals who probably should have never been in the position they were in. And I file those away and I grade myself against lessons I learned from them every day. And I just remember as a young man in one case and as a senior man working for these folks in another case, saying to myself over and over again, I'll never do that. That does not work. I know how I feel when he does that. I will never do that. So save it away. Now you can help. a lot of the folks who are senior here who have led companies or led military formations will tell you there is leadership and there is informal leadership. In almost every organization, even when you have a great leader, there's going to be some informal leaders below them. And they are the ones that keep things moving along. I would challenge you to be that informal leader. Find a way to take care of the people around you and below you. Try to give them, empower them with what it is. Okay, things are a mess here. That guy's liable to kill us, but we're going to figure out how we can do what we're responsible for well. And pick that out, carve it out, make yourself an informal leader, empower those around you and move out. I think that's the way to go after it. Several up here.
My name is Matthew Rashidi. I'm a PhD student at Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering.
Yes. We like that school. We like all the schools. We just like that one special.
So you mentioned to empower right people at right places, but that may not always be the case. But what will happen that you, in the middle of the way, you see that the people is not the right person?
Yeah.
So what is your approach that save you time and energy?
Okay, so this is a great question, and I have several personal failures in this area. I can't tell you all those stories, but let me tell you another thing that's on that slide that I used to teach. There's a couple of things on there. One of them is trust your people absolutely, completely, explicitly, 100%, right up to the nanosecond that they prove they cannot be trusted, and then fire them. So first and foremost, if you have people who work for you that you cannot trust, they have demonstrated that they are not trustworthy, cut them out like the cancer they are. Get rid of them. They will be a cancer in your organization. That's item one. Item two, you need to overcome your pride. In this case, I will tell you a story. I had an individual working for me. He was turning out not to be good. Not to be good. And he was making a bad impact on those who worked below him. And I determined that I was going to fix him. I determined that I was going to mentor and coach and put a lot of effort into this individual. And I think in the first case, that was the right instinct. You do want to bring people along and you want to help them. We're not all good. We're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. I can tell you I've made a lot of them. But there's a certain point where your attempt to fix a problem is maybe noble, but what's happening is the impact to the people below that problem is beginning to be far more disastrous to your organization than you fixing the one. These are the hard problems to solve. There is a time when you have to say, I could fix this individual. It may take me another 2 months, but the impact to the individuals below that person in the next 2 months is too injurious to my company or my organization, and I need to make a change. Those are the hard ones to do. But sometimes you have to make a change. You don't necessarily have to end a career, but you need to get that person into a different place so that you can get the right person in there. Remember the statement about get the right people in the right seats on the bus. Get the right people in the right seat on that bus so that the organization can move out, and then find a way that you can do this mentoring, coaching, leading with this individual in a different place. Why did I say this up the first? Don't let your pride get wrapped up in you. There was a situation when I was the commander of 3rd Air Force. I was a 3-star commander, and I had a problem, and I was determined to fix it. And I did. Actually, the individual now has gone on to do okay. Not super, but okay. But what happened to the people below him was wrong, and I should be held accountable for the wrong I did to the larger organization by not moving that individual earlier. So those are tough, tough, hard questions. I can't tell you a magic potion on that one.
Okay, we are going to take the last question and then we'll close the session and then move to the reception where General Breedlove will still be available to chat with you.
I'd love to shake some of your hands and meet the students in the crowd. That's the most exciting thing I do. It's like plugging into the wall and charging my batteries to see you all. And I really, I'll save some closing remarks for a minute. Last question.
Good evening. My name is Sam Denard. I am a civil engineering graduate here at Tech. And I just had a quick question. What made you decide to do the ROTC program here? And did you always know you wanted to do that when you first came into Tech?
Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a realism family story, so you'll have to bear with me. My father came from subsistence farming in the western part of North Carolina and had a 5th grade education. Fabulous human being, great father, provided for us in so many ways. But my father was never going to be able to help me with my college education. He helped me keep my car running because he could fix anything. And I love him, and he was a great leader and a great role model and taught me to be independent and self-sufficient, which I think are 2 of the best things I ever learned. But the fact of the matter was there was not going to be any money. Item 2, I was an avid reader as a child, and I got started reading books about flying airplanes when I was in about the 3rd grade. We had a relatively small library in Forest Park, Georgia, where I grew up. But by about the 5th grade, I'd read every flying book in that library. This was before online and everything, so you literally had to check out a book to read it. So I fell in love with flying. My father worked for Delta Airlines. He was employee number 330. They had 7 airplanes when he signed on with them. He was a blue-collar worker there. Remember, 5th grade education. But getting to fly free, seeing airplanes, reading about airplanes, I decided at a very young age I wanted to be a pilot. And my mother, who is an amazing human being, knew that I would never get to be a pilot if I didn't find a scholarship. And she started researching how you can get scholarships to get educations and go to fly. And from about 3 years old, I was saying to hell with Georgia because of how I was raised. My family was a Georgia Tech family. There was no discussing any other schools anywhere. And so my mother stayed on me like crazy to keep my grades up, to have sports and all of those things that made you a good target for a scholarship. I graduated very high in my class and was given an Air Force scholarship to attend here at Georgia Tech, and the rest is history. I got to tell you though, went to a small Georgia school, and I made my first B in my last semester, so I had like a 3.9 something. And I had taken an entire year of calculus in my little rural school. When I showed up at Georgia Tech and we covered that whole year in about the first 4 weeks, I knew I was in trouble. And my first year here at Georgia Tech was quite a challenge. My last 3 years went a lot better, but the first year was quite a challenge. But I grew up knowing I wanted to fly. I knew that my family couldn't afford to send me to college. My mother kept me focused on getting a scholarship through all of my high school years. It all worked. I came here and served with went to school with some incredible people. My closest friend and my roommate, Sandy Winnefeld, just retired as the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He graduated here in aeronautical engineering. This is a fabulous place to start your life. Let me tell you what I wanted to close with. I am all around the Air Force. Before I moved into Europe again and began commanding the U.S. Forces Europe and NATO's military forces, I was the Vice Chief of Staff in the United States Air Force, so I was the number 2 individual in our Air Force. And so I had a lot of vision into what was happening in the Air Force. Let me tell you what I saw in the labs. I saw lots of Georgia Tech engineers in our labs. From all kinds of disciplines here. Why? Because people know that students that graduate from here solve problems, and make things work. What I'm about to say, you might take as not a compliment. Out there in my Air Force and in some places of the world, we may not be seen as the super crazy, wow thinkers, but we're the people that listen to some of those guys and make their crazy dreams work. This school is known as creating engineers who know how to solve problems and make things work. And in my business, that's the kind of people you want hanging around. So you all are in a great place, getting a fabulous education, and America is waiting for you. They are waiting for you. I wish you all the best of luck.
On behalf of the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering, I'd like to present you with the construction bus. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. I'll open it up back here when we start having some munchies. I know some of you came to eat. I'm sorry to have kept you so long.